gun. A little theft from Galiana, and now Johan simply cannot call. If he wants to win, he's going to put in a raise. And this is unbelievable. Nobody believes.
No, are you? Galiana jams!
What?
The final level of that game has been reached.
This would be one of the sickest plays we'd have ever seen.
I'm going to start off this video by saying something y'all don't know about me. I watch an outrageous amount of poker content, and this is one of the sickest hands I've ever seen. So we're just going to jump right in. I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on. These guys are heads up in the 2024 $2,500 no limit hold'em freeze out. Stacks are deep. You know, they have over 50 big blinds each. You can see on the top left there. And they're playing heads up for a bracelet. You know, everyone's really going to want it. And Yoh Viral is Gilbert here on the left. And he is sick, sticky, crazy, like capable of some pretty outrageous things. And I've seen him firsthand and just from watching content. The other player on the left, Galiana, I don't know who he is. Seems just very reggy from my perception of him physically and watching this heads up match. And so we're going to jump right in. Let's see what happens.
Viral limps in here with the Jack Deuce 7-5 off for the Spaniard.
So limping small blind, it is worth noting here, you get to heads up, there's a big blind ante, you're immediately getting 5-1. So having folds is theoretically a no-no. And so you're going to want to have limps with some hands that can limp call, some hands that naturally limp fold, maybe like this Jack Deuce off, 7 Deuce off, stuff like that. But yeah, in general, don't fold heads up with a big blind ante. You're going to get run over if you are.
Ten, 6, 3. All clubs. No club and
Flop comes 10-6-3 all clubs. Both players have pretty much nothing. No one has a club. Galiana has a gut shot. Both players are very low in their range here.
either player's hand.
So it looks like a street that's super innocuous, right? Nothing really happens. It went check, check. But ranges actually become fairly defined in this spot, specifically for Gilbert. So the fact that he checks back here means it's somewhat unlikely that he has a big club. You know, if he had the nut flush or even just the ace of clubs, he'd probably start betting. And it's similar with hands like the king of clubs. And so by checking here, it does become significantly less likely that he has those big club combos, which is going to matter on the turn.
8 of clubs on the turn.
I personally would like to see a small bet there. There's a good chance that your opponent just has an auto fold. Plus, you actually do have a little bit of equity. If you get called, since you can still get called by like a 6 or an 8 or something like that, it's very unlikely the in-position player has a 10 since they checked the flop. And so, yeah, definitely like a small bet there. I think it's somewhat likely to win the hand. And, you know, just betting min is going to turn a very nice profit. And it also allows you to rep a small, not necessarily a small club, but a medium club or even a large club that might want to follow through on a later street. So this checks through again. Again, somewhat defining, where the in-position player is very likely to start betting the highest ranked clubs to get value and blow to pot, possibly get check raised by bluffs when his opponent has stuff. And so, you know, I am somewhat surprised that Yoh Viral on the left there didn't bet any street so far, but he decides to fight for it later.
Deuce of clubs on the river. Flush for both.
So now if I'm sitting in this guy's seat, I'm basically thinking it's somewhat unlikely my opponent has a club. It's probably semi-likely that I can easily have a lot of clubs. And I'm going to bet and try to get them to fold out a chop. you know, we're not going to get them to fold even the 4 of clubs here. If you bet 1.2 or, you know, even probably 2 million, I would expect a player as sticky as Yoh Viral to just call with any club. So, you know, the EV of a bluff here comes from getting them to fold out a chop. Therefore, betting, you're actually risking whatever amount to win 600K, not 1.2, which should, you know, is a little bit of a deviation from how you normally calculate the EV of a bluff. But yeah, worth mentioning.
Galiana will.
He chooses big, which I like. He's repping a club. His opponent's somewhat likely to call with a chop when he has a club. You know, his bluffs benefit from getting them to fold a chop. So, yeah, I think this looks pretty good so far. But now's where things get interesting.
Lead for 900,000. Check, check, flop, check, check, turn. What does Yoh Viral have planned?
You know, as played, seems like we would have heard from a club by now, whether it was the flop or the turn. And that's from either opponent. Now, Galiana leading for 900, sizable, trying to clearly pick this pot up.
I think what Brent says there is especially true for Yoh Viral in position. Like, if he had a club, like we mentioned before, wouldn't he have just bet an earlier street? At least at a very high frequency. So I don't know if him thinking about raising this river is because, okay, I'm pretty sure my opponent's weak, so I'm going to put in a bluff raise to get him to fold out a chop. I'm not really certain what's going through a psychopath's head, and I mean that in the kindest way. Like, this guy's pretty legendary. But yeah, you know, it's really hard to break that part down. But I think that there's some of the re-raises that are coming that I can have a lot of interesting insight for you guys on.
Well, both players are chopping, and I think Yoh Viral is sensing and understanding that Galiana just doesn't have any clubs. What would he have played in this regard? Going check, check, flop, check, check, turn. So we've got a little theft from Galiana, and now Johan simply cannot call. If he wants to win, he's going to put in a raise.
That's not true. He could have called. He's calling 900K to win 600K. It has to work more often. Like, it has to work 60% of the time to break even. 900 divided by the quantity of 6 plus 9, because he's winning 6 and calling 9. So yeah, that's just blatantly not true. He can call here if he thinks his opponent is weak. I actually think a call is better because, you know, cutoff points is like kind of what this hand is all about to me. We don't know our opponent's cutoff points. If you're raising here, he might just call for a chop. He might rebluff you. And so that's where I think he goes wrong in this hand, to be honest, is like, okay, maybe he makes this sick read that his opponent's weak and he's fairly confident in it. That's what he's going for here. And he also knows, I can't raise that big because I want to rep like a medium club because I didn't bet earlier streets, so it's not really super credible for me to have those other clubs. So, you know, I kind of get what he's doing here, but calling's probably plus EV. If you only have to be right to call here 60% of the time, then if you're right 80% of the time, you're going to turn a substantial profit. Like, you don't have to go crazy, and you'll see what happens.
Does just that.
And that's what he does. A small raise at that.
I love the recheck of the cards here from Galiana, because it seems to me like, based on when his opponent was sitting there thinking, he's like, man, no way I'm going to let this shit slide. I'm going to rebluff. And so, like, gets raised, snap rechecks his cards, like, oh, is the big club there? So I like that. I think it was somewhat credible. You know, we can obviously see he doesn't have a club, but that was cool.
For everything just stated, I think it remains true. Where what clubs can Gilbert have? Would he really not have bet the flop?
The same logic here applies for calling for a chop, right? If you think your opponent's bluffing, you're calling to win 2 million, you're risking 1 million. So a call would be probably quite plus EV if you think your opponent doesn't have a club. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that rebluffing isn't more plus EV. And in poker, it's actually our job to determine what is the most plus EV option. And so, yeah, calling might be massively plus EV, but Galiana thinks that re-raising is more plus EV. And sometimes you kind of get like, I get too zoned in on one of the decisions and forget about the others. I think that that's super common for everyone. And, you know, when I'm working on my game, I try to remind myself to consider all the options. I can bet as much as I want or as small as I want. I can do whatever I want. Like, it's no limit poker. It's like kind of the beauty of it.
If he had, call it Jack 9 with some sort of random club, right? Would he really not have bet a flush on the turn? And there's just simply no way for Galiana to call, right? The only decision is, okay, I could raise, or excuse me, I could fold now, or...
Again, like I just stated, strongly disagree with Brent there. He can call. It's fine.
I could raise once more. This is very bizarre. It's a game of chicken between both players. Who will jump out of the way first?
Well, here we go.
And that game will continue right here, right now.
Oh my goodness.
He goes pretty big,
raise. Nobody
which
has
I like.
anything.
Galliana.
Like he goes over 3x here, which I actually think is a pretty good sizing. You know, it's your sizings in general are dictated from your value portion of your range. So like if he has the ace or king of clubs here, I mean, even the queen of clubs, right? Because we mentioned on the first raise by Gilbert in position that he's kind of repping like a medium club. So the queen of clubs is probably the nuts here. And so I really like going big here. That's what the value portion of his range wants to go. And yeah, see what happens next. I'll let you know. Yoh Viral does not fold.
3 million.
I mean, is Johan really going to see through this? The 3-bet on the river.
This would be some
I
kind
can't
of
fathom
outrageous.
him pulling the trigger and clicking it back. This would be one of the sickest plays we'd have ever seen.
The heart on this guy is unbelievable.
I know he takes his time.
Both of
this
them.
one is necessary, though, because I believe he is genuinely considering something heroic.
I love PokerGo. All this content is insane. I wish they wouldn't cover up seats. So, like, for those graphics there.
Oh,
Reaching,
oh my
announces
gosh.
raise.
Are you kidding me? How does he find it?
So this is kind of interesting, something you'll see here. So min raise is obviously, you know, what a min raise is. Galiana made it 4.35 million more. So a min raise from Gilbert is 10.65. He only put out 10. I wonder if the dealer catches it.
Makes it 10 million.
Like, that's less than min. Dealer does not catch it. Maybe someone in the earpiece will later. This guy's dealt to me. He's fantastic, by the way, but it's a crazy 4-bet spot, right? Like, it's understandable to make that mistake. And this guy just doesn't believe him. So here's something that's kind of interesting. When Yoh Viral 4-bets the river to 10 million, he's basically repping the ace of clubs. So, like, a question you kind of have to ask yourself is, how would I play the ace of clubs? To be honest, he might just rip it or make it bigger. So that's kind of where this hand gets a little incredulous to me, where I just don't really believe. Like, I liked his small sizing on the first raise because it's like, okay, I raise small because I have a 9 of clubs and it's a value raise. It's hard to get called by worse. Small, cool, great. But now it's like you're repping a hand that if you actually had that ace of clubs, you're not going to click it back here. You're probably going to go for a larger sizing, possibly even all in. And I think that's kind of where he goes wrong here, is like he's very confident that his opponent is bluffing, but maybe not confident enough to rip it all in.
This is unbelievable. Nobody believes. No, are you?
Galiana jams!
What?
The final level of that game has been reached.
Well, they did catch the raise there. No, not the right amount still.
What is happening?
He rips it. I mean,
way!
the hand's just absolutely epic.
No way!
Hats off, you know.
That's one of the best bluffs.
And like, it's so important to really think about the entire hand. I think Yoh Viral got a little bit hung up on the fact that I think this guy's bluffing, but he didn't really think about the cutoff points, right? So I'll tell you a little short story about from when I was like coming up. It was probably 15 years ago. I'm living with Ben Lamb and he's playing online PLO and I'm like watching and like buying a small piece. And there's this hand where he defends the big blind with just some 4 cards, you know, standard heads up shit. And the board comes queen 5 deuce with 2 clubs and it goes check, check. The turn's a jack of clubs and he leads with 2 pair for a small sizing and gets raised. And he goes, watch this. And I was like, what do you mean? You have 2 pair and you got raised. Like, the guy's probably bluffing, you just call. And he was like, no, I'm going to get him to spaz with the ace of clubs because I know that he would have bet all of his nut flush draws on the flop. And, you know, PLO has evolved a ton from this. Like I said, it was 15 years ago. But that's exactly what happened. He re-raised small with 2 pair. The guy 4-bet, I guess. He 5-bet and the guy 6-bet shoved the flop. And Ben just like snapped him off with 2 pair and the guy had a bare ace of clubs. And it was one of like the most epic hands that I remember like watching someone play. And this one's very similar where you have to make sure that the story you're telling makes sense from start to finish. So I don't know. I hope you guys like this one. Like I said, this is one of the coolest hands that I've ever seen. I just love when people go crazy and you have this air on air violence. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.